So when I feel myself as whole and I take that path, the same direction I'm going to, it's a whole different reality that opens up, because we can take the same path, one, feeling that we're not enough, and then two, feeling that we are whole and we deserve whatever comes our way. It's a whole different reality that sort of manifests around us.
Welcome back to the Higher Love Project. I'm really excited to have this next guest on the podcast, and his name is Emilio Ortiz. Now, Emilio is someone I've been following for a while, and he has a podcast of his own that I have been listening to and been integrating into my day-to-day life and weekly routine, because he is having some of the most insightful conversations with some of the greatest wisdom keepers, scientists, businessmen, spiritual channelers. I mean, the list goes on, around the world. And the insightful knowledge and information that is being spread across his podcast is truly profound, and it certainly has transformed my life. And so it is a really wonderful honor to have him speaking on this episode and on the show. We dived into a lot of really interesting topics that I cannot wait for you to listen and to take on and sort of digest within yourself and into your system. May it help you gather new tools and ways of looking at your life and looking at your reality in the best way possible. And may this seriously be an invitation for you, after listening to this episode, to go over to Just Tap In podcast by Emilio and do your life the favor by integrating his episodes into your routine. Whether it's on the train, whether it's on the bus, wherever you listen to your podcasts, I highly encourage you go and digest the fascinating conversations that are happening over there. He's all about awakening the next generation of leaders, raising consciousness, awakening humanity for the new earth, and to raise the collective. And he's doing a wonderful job. So I will leave it here and we will get straight into the episode. I'm so excited to share this one with you. Thank you so much, firstly, for joining and for being on the podcast. So my first question to you is if you're open to share a little bit about your background and what led you into your work with your podcast on raising consciousness.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited that you took the leap to start your own podcast. I know that conversations are an art in itself, and Tony Robbins said that the quality of our life is determined by the quality of our questions. So, for anyone even remotely thinking about doing a podcast, it really is a masterpiece to get to, ask questions that will allow you to think differently, ask questions that will raise consciousness. And before really diving into my personal story, I'd love to just give an overview of what is really going on in the world right now with the consciousness, because I feel like my situation was no different than what a lot of people are going through in what they may call a spiritual awakening, or seeing things different, taking the red pill from the matrix, if we want to use that terminology. But
yeah,
I feel that right now the earth is going through the end of a 26,000 year cycle, and we are entering a new age where a lot more light is coming onto the planet, and the elevation of consciousness is inevitable for humanity. So my personal journey was very much, a sort of normal, segue into college, the transition from high school to college. I was trying to be someone that I wasn't in the first year of university. And I was being that party kid, going out, getting drunk, getting tables at nightclubs, and sustaining that lifestyle for 6-7 months. It wasn't feasible for my body. It wasn't feasible for my health. So I kind of had to take a step back. And I think when we take those step backs after going through a rock bottom, or feeling that, our body is telling us, it's whispering to us, you can't keep going like this, you can't keep going to like this. I was just in a moment where I had to look at what I had been creating in my outer reality, and it all started from within. I wasn't feeling enough. I didn't feel that I fit in. I didn't feel that I was worthy enough to, belong to a group. So I had to act or pretend a certain way. And it was during that point where I sort of randomly typed in on Google, because I couldn't understand why there were so many successful people out there, people like Elon Musk, people like Steve Jobs, that they had been, creating all these companies, creating all these lifestyles. And I'm here 21 years old and I can't even get out of bed to go to class because I'm fatigued, I'm tired, I'm groggy, I'm moody, I, hadn't slept. I had, um, in many ways, just not been looking out for myself. So I typed that in and I said, what do these billionaires actually do? Like, they must have a secret sauce. They must have a plan that I don't know about. And what I found was that they had two things in common. These highly successful people had two things in common, and one was that they love to learn and they love to gain knowledge. And a lot of these people are self-taught. You look at someone like Bill Gates. He is reading, hundreds and hundreds of books every
Yeah,
single year.
definitely
Hmm.
the books are a big one.
Yes. And, at that point, I hadn't even touched the book since probably fifth grade. So I was like, oh, these people read. That's interesting. And the second part was that they all had a practice such as meditation or mindfulness to get their mind sharpened. Um, and of course, exercise and nutrition, all these other things are part of the habits for success. But the main one that was coming up for me was the mental faculties, the meditation, the mindfulness. And I was really lucky because when I lived in California, my mom had her own awakening, and she trained to be a master Kundalini yoga instructor. So I already had that in my sort of sphere, and I had never approached her about it. I said, she's doing her own things. She's kind of like the weird mom that would come to the basketball games and be like meditating. All of a sudden, I'd look up in the crowd and like all the dads, all the moms are cheering their kids, and my mom's with her eyes closed and headphones
Sort
in,
of channeling the guides so that you would win.
So I would score some 3-pointers. I don't know, but
what age did your mum sort of awaken and get into the Kundalini work?
I was around 15, 16 years old, and we were, living in California at that time. She started to go to yoga classes, and eventually that just led her deepen into that knowledge. And she had all the books as well. All the masters, Deepak Chopra, Wayne Dyer, all of those guys were in my house, sitting there on a shelf that I hadn't really touched or was interested in. And there was this quote that came to me around this time was, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So I felt that in many ways in I was ready to sort of go through this initiation of learning wisdom and knowledge, and learning different things to view my life in a different way. And that sort of led on its own journey of uncovering, of peeling back layers within myself, and really noticing that the person that I had been building and fabricating for society was not the person that I really was. So I had to do a lot of work on that aspect of who really am I. And that led to even actions that in many ways could be seen as fearless. Like starting a podcast is a fearless act, but I had that because I knew who I was and I knew how I served. And I knew that I was here and I was put here for a deeper purpose and a deeper meaning. So a lot of the actions that followed that could be seen as fearless, but it really was just me acting from the most authentic part of myself. So that really led its own, path with the podcast, with, interviewing brilliant minds around the world and such.
Yeah, and was for you, because I know it was sort of that transition time when you were at university, and for any young listeners who are here and are perhaps getting slightly curious, a lot of us in our 20s are typically starting our first jobs. We're entering the matrix heads on. When was that sort of breaking point for you when you were at university? What after Googling, what the great minds and the great sort of creators of the world are doing, what was the shift for
Hmm.
you? Sort of, was it Googling it? Was it at that moment, or was it at another time in your life within uni?
Hmm. I see that you have, for people watching on video, you have a tree behind you. And,
Yeah.
any single tree starts with a seed. And I think in my life, in my earlier childhood, like when my mom started to wake up and different life experiences, I moved a lot as a kid. It really planted seeds. And I think that the awakening as a whole for humanity, it all starts with little seeds. So certain seeds will start waking up and then they'll inform. I don't know if you've seen how even like a caterpillar comes into form. It starts off, as a caterpillar most of its life, devouring everything around itself. And that's sort of, like us, we're devouring, we're consuming, we're, getting, we're grabbing. Um, and in a certain moment, there are these cells within the caterpillar that they call them the imaginal cells, which are the cells that inform the caterpillar that it's time for a transition, it's time for an evolution. So, it really is a process within the caterpillar that starts its own process of becoming that butterfly. And I think when someone enters their 20s, we have an idea of what the 20s have to be about. And we have an
Yeah.
idea about what college has to be about. And I was programmed with the idea from conditioning. When you see on television, when you see on these, Disney Channel movies, when you see everything, you know, college is about partying, fucking up, drinking, all of these different things. And there is a side to that as well. And I think, you have to sometimes live the experience to understand what it's about. But since I came with this idea to college, I took that idea head on and I rode with it. Um, and it was sort of that stepping back of, wait, let me see who sold this idea to me. Do I really want my whole 20s to be the way they've been going for the past 7 months? Or there's an alternative to that, which is 20s is really about investing in yourself, investing in your skill set. What skills do you want to build up? Your network as well. This is the time where, you can take those chances and, go to that meetup party, that entrepreneurship conference, that wellness conference, and meet all these people that are interested or remotely interested in things that you're beginning to, feel a passion or a curiosity for. I feel like passion doesn't switch on and off like this. It's something that's a gradual process that starts with curiosity. So every time I start asking myself a lot of questions, I'm like, oh, there's something there. There's a little bit of passion, because if there's a part of me that is gravitating toward that, let me follow it. And this whole journey has been a process of me following that, internal whispering, internal curiosity. I think there are things that are, since our childhood, very very deeply embedded in us, which Robert Greene, the author, he calls them childhood inclinations. So a lot of us shut those down in childhood, but when we follow the childhood inclinations all the way through our 20s, all the way through, even our 30s, our 40s, that becomes a
Mm.
life of purpose, that becomes a life of passion. But when we don't shut those down, that's when it's beautiful.
Yeah, and also I think, does that relate? Because that's the first time I'm hearing it in this way. Um, that relates to following the heart and having an open heart, because I think a lot of the conditioning we're being taught from when we're kids, we are so dependent on the parent to we're receiving from the parent, and a lot of that unfortunately closes our heart or starts protecting the heart from a very young
Mm,
age, and then we're not aware of it, and then it's suddenly a wiring embedded within our subconscious which we carry into
mm,
adulthood. And a lot of the old matrix and society which we are breaking from has told us to keep the heart shut and to close it and to protect it. And that moves me on to touching on identity constructs and sort of what that means to you, and how did you, in this transition of following your passion and following your curiosity, when you decided to do that, were you faced with certain limiting beliefs that you had embedded within your own wiring
Mm.
and having to break free from that quote unquote persona that you thought you had to be? Did you have those limiting beliefs that you had to like face?
Yeah, I think we all do, and there are certain limiting beliefs that are sort of a pattern throughout all of humanity. When you think about why do we shut our heart down? Why do we close off from other people? Is because the ego is protecting us. It's telling us you are separate from this person. And the more I got into channeled writing, spiritual texts, learning from these gurus, if you want to call them, you realize that they're saying the same thing. They're saying that we are all individuations of that one consciousness, that one source. And we came here to learn through form. We came here to learn through duality. And the ego is part of this third dimensional reality. It's the part of us that has to tell us you are not that person. You are not that. You are an individuation. That's why you're here. You are here to learn through being an individual sort of speck of consciousness. But really, we're all connected to that whole. And the biggest limiting belief that we all, I think, carry with us is you are separate. And that is the limiting belief that sort of plugs us into this matrix as well. So we have to learn how to navigate it, because the ego is a very powerful thing. I think the ego is an aspect that we can leverage, but it's also an aspect that can harm us in many ways. Because when the ego thinks, oh, I'm going to sit on my high chair and look at everyone and they're all different from me, and that group over there is completely alien and we have nothing in common. That's how wars begin. Or they have different beliefs than me, so they must be crazy, or they must be completely alienated from society. So that's why we have these massive separation on a large scale that creates wars. And from believing ourselves to be separate, we feel that we are not enough. And that's another one that Marissa Peer, psychotherapist, she talks
Yeah.
about. It's one of the biggest limiting beliefs that we all carry is we're not enough. So coming into a space like let's say a new endeavor that you're about to go on, I had to face a lot of that, self-sabotage and that limiting belief of, I feel like I'm an imposter talking to these people. I feel like I'm an imposter sitting down with someone like Joe Dispenza. I didn't feel that I was worthy to receive that until I broke it and I said, okay, let me see what's underneath that subconscious of why I feel that I have to constantly prove to the outer world that I can achieve that. And I learned a lot. And that's, a past pattern that I've been trying to break, which is learning through struggle, learning through pain, learning through hard work. That is, I would say, even a limiting belief, because some things, when I go down the path of more resistance, I separate myself from the experience I'm trying to get. And when I take the path of less resistance and I say, and resistance doesn't mean that it's not going to be difficult. It doesn't mean that it's not going to be challenging. It just means that you sort of open up yourself to the unknown, and you open up yourself to, let me see what's there when I don't believe myself of not being enough. So when I feel myself as whole and I take that path, the same direction I'm going to, it's a whole different reality that opens up, because we can take the same path, one, feeling that we're not enough, and then two, feeling that we are whole and we deserve whatever comes our way. It's a whole different reality that sort of manifests around us. So those are just some of the limiting beliefs that I had to go through personally, but I feel they're also universal to everyone, and to anyone incarnating as form, as a human being, where they're truly an infinite, eternal soul, powerful beyond measure, and capable of creating anything they want with just those beliefs that are sort of underneath all the conscious mind. So we really have to get down to the core.
Yeah, that's definitely hitting home for, I think, myself and anyone, the imposter syndrome that we can feel, and the rooted limiting belief of, am I enough? And am I sort of like you said, worthy to receive what I want if I go after what I want despite the fear.
Mm.
And I think the fear is connected to the ego because it's all in separation of love and in separation of the oneness that you mentioned. And what did it teach you specifically about the ego and the ego of just the collective, the ego mind that we all have, when you started raising your awareness of your limiting beliefs? Do you like find yourself having to catch out your ego at times because it's very clever?
It's super clever. I think the ego is the intellect in many ways, and I think the more that we go on a conscious path, the more we have to watch out for the ego. It's sort of like the stronger, the smarter it gets, because now it goes, oh, this person is raising their consciousness. I'm gonna have to go around that and try to get through to them in another way. Um, One book that really set me on a different paradigm of what the ego was is The New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. And he talks about in that book that the ego is the part of ourselves that wants to identify with things, with labels, with anything outside of us. So the more we begin to start identifying ourselves with, oh, I'm a podcaster, I wear this type of clothes, my haircut is this way, I have these types of eyes, I have these types of lips or whatever, we start identifying so much with our body and with our possessions, everything that is an extension of the ego. um, and the ego is a part of ourselves that also wants to amass more and more, because again, it doesn't feel that it's enough. So the more that it can have outside of itself, so it buys the huge mansion, or it buys the nice car that everyone's going to look at to feel like, oh, I'm identified with this, this is me, this is just an extension of me. But when you get down to even spiritual traditions, you say, what is the me part? What is that? What is that consciousness? And when I started doing more meditation practices, I would just begin to have like all of these thoughts that were coming from this voice, this inner voice inside of my head. And some of those thoughts I didn't like, because I had never truly sat down to observe them or to understand where they were coming from. I thought it was just me. It was my thoughts. It was, just what I was thinking in the moment. But in meditation, there's sort of like a detachment that goes on from that inner voice and an observer. And when we try to sort of go into that observer sort of paradigm and purview of what's going on, we say, these thoughts are not necessarily coming from me. And it's the thoughts that then sort of encourage us to take action in our life. I think it's that seed of, okay, if I have a thought of, building X project, the action that follows that is coming from the thought. But there are also thoughts that are coming from that lack, coming from that separation, coming from fear, that also encourage us to take actions based on that energy. And whatever you put in darkness calls you to the darkness. Whatever you put in fear calls you to the fear. So it's really looking from a very, panoramic point of view of what are all these thoughts that are in my head, and
Yeah, and are they
are they
yours?
yours?
Or are they internalized from a projection from someone else and their thoughts that was projected from someone else?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, are any of our thoughts ours?
Yeah.
And
There's
yeah,
a
that's a
tool.
really good point.
There's a tool in Access Consciousness that is, um, whenever you're going through a situation, well, let's say you're feeling something in your stomach, or you're feeling something in your body, because our body is the subconscious mind speaking to our conscious mind, because the subconscious doesn't have language. It doesn't communicate in words. It communicates in symbols, in feelings, in sort of the more right-brained aspects. And the body is a vessel for the subconscious to sort of have a dialogue with the conscious. So whenever we have something in our body going on, we have to ask ourselves, does this belong to me? Because sometimes I'm in a room, and for someone that is opening themselves up psychically, opening themselves up in conscious awareness, they become more perceptive to other people's energies and other people's agendas and other people's intentions, other people's motivations. So when you're in that sort of environment, when you're placed around other people, you have to ask yourself, does this belong to me? And a lot of the times you are just taking on someone else's emotions because you're empathically tuning into their energy field, because the energy field is, something that we can't really see, but every time you're close to someone or every time you're having an interaction, your energy fields sort of overlap each other. And there's people that are psychic that can actually see the auras, they can see the energy centers, and they can see that when two people are having a conversation, it's really sort of like they're on top of each other in a way energetically. They're sort of exchanging sacred information, energetic information. So really, we have to know that everything that we do, everything that we say affects everyone else around us. And we're also so perceptive that we can be affected by people around us. And we have to ask ourselves, what belongs to us? Did I buy this opinion from someone else? A lot of the things you'll start to realize you're in a group, and then the gossip comes in, and someone will say something about someone else, and you'll be like, oh yeah, like I agree with that. But are you really agreeing, or do you just want to feel yourself sort of part of the group and not be
Yeah.
alienated from the other
But
people?
it also, I think the ego is operating heavily in our survival mode and within the survival instinct that we have within the body. And if we think about sort of back in the day when we were in tribes, if we were excluded from the tribe, you died, you didn't make it. And so we felt we always needed each other a long, long time ago. And so sometimes also going on that journey of questioning and becoming the observer, it's also asking you spiritually to go on that sort of solo journey and to endure solitude, because you do start looking around your environment and go, hang on, how am I fitting into this? And is this really truth? Is this real? Moving on to like my next question, which talks more about the matrix and the concept that life isn't happening to us, it's happening through us, is sometimes for new people quite a big one to wrap their head around, because so often we've experienced life happening to us and at us, and when something in our environment happens, sometimes the subconscious creates that victim mindset and the ego pops up, and it, again, we're operating from a series of limiting beliefs. How would you explain to someone who is new to this concept of life working through you rather than life happening to you?
I agree that it has to come in stages. So there is a stage of our consciousness where we believe that life is happening to me. This situation, it just happened to me. And that's sort of the stage where we're the most victim to our environment. We don't believe that we are creators. We don't believe that we actually have the power to shift our external reality, because we were born into this, and we feel that everything around us is fixed, and whatever changes is because something outside of ourselves had to change and not something from within ourselves. So when we start evolving, let's say, those aspects of our consciousness that believe ourselves to be non-creators, and we stop identifying with everything around us, we stop looking at the external world and saying everything belongs to me, everything that I've created is mine, and everything that's come to me is because of spontaneity. There's no magic in that. It's just like, this is what I was given, this is what I was born into. And for people that really go down the path of becoming masters of their destiny, becoming manifestors, it's a different overview of what consciousness really means, because consciousness is everything that is and judges nothing. And also, consciousness is the creator aspect of ourselves. Consciousness creates everything. If you look at nature, there are certain things that we can't even explain, because we believe that these trees, or we believe that these plants don't have sentience, but in a way there's a divine consciousness working through and orchestrating everything. And it's the same with us, because we're part of this interconnected web of reality, And we're not separate. We're not separate from nature. We're not separate from the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom. There's also etheric realms that we can't even see with our eyes that we're deeply connected with, things like angels, things like spirit guides. So when we sort of open perception and we open ourselves up to realizing that we're not this separate, individual piece of meat, then we say, okay, we are creators of all of this. We are um, aspects and particles of that divine consciousness that works through everything. If it can work through a tree, why can't it work through me? If it can work through, you know even things like the ocean, the waves, the tides, how all these energies intermingle to create such perfection. Because there's some things that we say, if this would be off by 1 degree, then life could not happen. Like literally 1 degree off, if there was a little bit more carbon dioxide in the air, life would not be able to exist.
Yeah, we wouldn't be here.
And we're also spinning on a ball going through space at hundreds of thousands of miles an hour. And really, it's realizing that we are a miracle and this life is a miracle. And from going to victim to creator, there has to be a leap in consciousness of understanding that interconnected nature that we are. And when you say life is happening through us, I believe it's not all the time, because when the ego gets in the way, life happens to me. When the ego gets in the way, life is hard. We have to push to get what we want. We have to go on top of other people to get what we want. We have to manipulate. We have to lie. We have to do power grabs to get what we want. That's when life is happening to me, because it's dependent on me, the ego. So I have to sort of, to get, if I want this job, I have to sort of manipulate myself into that, and I have to step on other people, and I have to, climb my way up. But the moments where we sort of let go and we let the illusion of the driver, which is the ego, take a back seat and let another energy step in, that divine intelligence that I'm telling you about in nature that we can see, that creates miracles, that creates perfection, that's when life starts, happening through us. And that's when the opportunities that we thought could never be possible start coming into us, because it's not us pushing and struggling and fighting to get it. It's us more so releasing and allowing. And there's a lot of, when we talk about masculine and feminine energy, it really is a lot about bringing in the feminine energy. We all have both. We all have a different sort of balance of both energies. And nature is feminine. And life happening through us is bringing in and calling in the feminine. And the masculine is there. It's a powerful energy as well. It's the thing that builds the structure, the direction, the clarity. But the miracles, the creativity, all of that come from that energy that flows through and out of us. It's people like channelers that I've had the opportunity to talk to. When I see them channeling, they explain to me that their consciousness, what they think is Paul Selig, what they think is Lee Harris, they have to step back and allow, a new energy to flow and channel through them. And I think we're all channeling, independent if you think you have, the 33 archangel beings, whatever, you're channeling those beings or those angels. We're also channeling in our daily life when we step out of the way. And that's when life happens through us and from us as well.
Yeah, especially we're channeling even when we're just being creative. It's sometimes, whether it's making music or a painting or poetry or dancing, the feminine is that creative energy, and it taps into a vortex as well that is multidimensional. And the feminine, yeah, it's very, very powerful, but also honoring the balance between getting ideas and letting ideas flow through you, which is always a channel. And for anyone that's listening, if you ever get that idea or that spark or that passion, should I start this endeavor, or this would be a great idea, I'd love to try this out, you're channeling some sort of version of your higher self and higher divine essence. And yeah, also to anyone listening, we encourage you to tap into the voices and the ideas and the creative surges that you might get time to time in your life. And moving into the sort of inner child, and sort of the ego often finding ways to protect the inner child and our subconscious wiring because it's what it's familiar with as well. Why do you think it's important for people to maybe get curious or to start embarking on that journey and on that process of addressing inner child wounds and the subconscious wiring?
I can only speak from my experience with the inner child. And I know that that term does come from psychology. It has many roots to it. And the concept of the inner child, for me, in my understanding, is the part of ourselves that we think it's a past version of us. But the inner child is always there. There's an essence of the child within us at all times. And I've known when I can activate it. I've known when it comes out, and I allow it to come out. Just yesterday, I went on a hike, and I thought it was going to be the most chill hike. We were going to, see all the scenery, and the guide takes us down to the river, and he said, "We're going to climb to the top of the river where the biggest waterfall is." But it was going through all the rocks, so we had to like sort of jump and leap and climb. Literally, it was a dangerous, it's a dangerous hike. But essentially, there was a moment where the only focus I could have was on the next step, because if I took a wrong step, if I was thinking about, if I was thinking about this podcast today, if I was thinking about what I had to do this week, the flight that I have back to Spain, I wouldn't have been in a present state, and I could have taken a bad step and severely hurt myself. So the inner child was just playing. It was there. It was like that aspect that imagines. I used to imagine when I was a little kid that I had superhero powers, and I would dress up as Flash. I would dress up as Batman. I would run around the house. It's that essence of us that is innocent, but in a way it lives in its own reality, and it lives in this dream world. It's the door to the subconscious and the conscious is wide open, because the brain waves that we're operating at when we're very young are theta brain waves. Those are the same brain waves that they use for hypnosis. So essentially, we're like the sponge. Like everything around us is awe. So we see a waterfall. If it's the first time we've seen a waterfall, imagine if you looked at a huge waterfall right now and it's the first time you're seeing one. That's awe.
That's overwhelming, isn't it?
Overwhelm, awe. It's sort of seeing the world with new eyes. And even though if I've seen, everything around me every single day, and I've seen it multiple times a day, I've already created like an energy to it. I'm familiar with it. There's a practice where, this is coming from Paul Selig's work with the guys that he channels, is there's a claim that you can make it goes like this: behold, I make all things new. And that's sort of inviting the inner child in, because everything the inner child sees is like new. It's novelty. Creativity flows from novelty. The flow state flows from novelty. And whenever we can bring that essence in, I think that's when we're most tapped in. Of course, there are certain things that happen to us in our childhood that could be traumatic experiences. We could feel wounds that go along the lines of abandonment, or again, not feeling worthy. And that's where we need to build a relationship with the inner child, because sometimes the inner child won't want to come out because it's afraid, because it doesn't want to be seen. Maybe it didn't feel seen when we were younger. So now that we're adults, it's still hiding. It's still, curled up in a ball. That's why when a lot of people go through like regressions to their inner child, the first thing they see is the child like rolled up in a corner, sort of like hidden and scared. And the invitation is to then hug the inner child and let them know that they're safe. Imagine if you could sort of go back to your 2-year-old, 3-year-old self and have a conversation with them now. And it's a different level of
Yeah.
consciousness that's talking to them. And we can't necessarily change the past, but we can change the way we see the past. So, and the way we change the way we see our past flows into the present and then creates a new future, a new timeline. And the inner child also, I think the last thing I'll say on it is it's the part of us that plays the most. And when we can invite that play into sort of any job that we're in, like just last week, I was in Fort Lauderdale. We were filming a new TV series on psychic abilities, and it's supposed to be like a very like professional, like very serious environment. We're filming. There's a whole crew, and
this was with Forbidden Knowledge.
Forbidden Knowledge TV. That's a series that's
Yeah.
going to come out pretty soon. And we were there, and I felt, since it was my first time doing a TV show, having to read off a teleprompter, I felt that I had to do it very professionally and be very serious and be very stoic and sort of fabricate an idea that I'd done this before, and hide the fact that I was nervous.
Bit like me on the podcast.
Exactly. Yeah, when I started off, I was like shitting my pants. I'm like, I need to go to the bathroom. Can we take a break?
Yeah.
But when I first, when I started doing the intros for the series and reading them on the teleprompter, I was like just very stiff. And then the producers say, just loosen up, like have fun with it. And as soon as I did that, my inner child was just like, we're here. There's literally like cameras everywhere. Like it's just that part that sort of laughs a little bit at everything, not in a cynical way, not in like a very disrespectful
doesn't take
way.
It too seriously.
Exactly.
Almost
takes away the rigidness, brings in the flexibility. And when we're flexible, let's say we've wanted something our whole life. We wanted this accomplishment. The rigid person would say, I have to go from A to B to C to D, all the way to Z until I get there. The person that invites the inner child and is in a sort of play mode and sort of that flexibility, it can jump from A to W in a minute, and it can get there, just without a lot of that effort, because the effort is what sort of also sometimes takes us away from experiences, because we feel, again, the lack, we feel the separation. So the inner child, I think it's the superpower that we all have within us to create and to sort of open ourselves up to seeing the world anew, seeing the world with different eyes. Awe is one of the most powerful energies that I've been able to channel in my life, because that's the energy I bring into interviews. That's the energy I bring into conversations with people. It's like every time I look at this person's eyes, it's peeking into a new universe. Because even though we all share the same, reality, let's say the same construct, the same things that we see around us, we all see everything differently. We've all had different relationships with things in a different way. So every time you have a conversation and open up to someone's perspective, it's literally opening up the doors to awe. And that's when it comes in, just to channel the inner child and form a relationship with it, form a very special bond, and calling it forth sometimes. Maybe in that moment when I was recording the series, I was very rigid. The producers, they helped me like invite my inner child. They say, he's safe here. You can bring him out. And maybe the final product will be even better if you're in that energy, in that state.
And you're safe enough to know you're not going to be rejected by bringing that innocence out and that purity to the table.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That moves me on to sort of touching on the idea of being very creative with the inner child and being creators of our reality. Have you got any experiences or examples that you would be open to share? Something that sort of was quite significant for you when you were trying to manifest something or draw something into your life with a set intention. Do you have an example of anything in your life that came into manifestation through this process?
I feel like the whole podcast in itself was a manifestation. And there are certain projects that we give birth to that sort of um, extend ourselves into the world. And for me, the podcast has just been a journey of continuous sort of refinement of myself and of my ability as a creator. Because a lot of the people that, are drawn to the mission, are drawn to the podcast, is because we put out a certain energy into the world that then brings that sort of into a conglomeration. For me, it was putting out the intention that I wanted to bridge new consciousness ideas with the next generation of leaders, because I felt when I was going through my awakening, I was pretty lost, and I had to, sort of seek things out for myself and sort of read all the books and see what worked and see what didn't work. But when you're having a conversation with someone who has done the work, and people that have been in this space for years and years and years, every time you listen to them, they're transmitting an energy. So it's an exchange. They're sort of giving you not just the knowledge, but the energy and the frequency behind that knowledge that they've cultivated within themselves. And when it comes to manifestation, I feel there's a whole equation, if we'll say like a whole equation to manifest, and that is conscious thought multiplied by conscious action. And a lot of our thoughts might go through our mind as very unconscious. They're deeply ingrained in that subconscious. They'll flow through. Eventually there'll be like that thought of I'm not enough, or who are you to think you can do this? But there's also the part of us that can actually consciously send a thought that then creates ripples in the quantum field that aligns that potential, whatever we're trying to create, and aligns it into our reality. And I would just say overall, a lot of us think that we, in the manifestation space, that, the moment, if it's a full moon, I'll just write down, I want to manifest a partner with these types of eyes, maybe they speak French or whatever. And we'll just like close the booklet and it's done, right? And we'll say, it is done. So it is, whatever. And then
it's written on paper.
We'll put it away.
So it must be done.
We'll put it away. But the thing is, you've taken the thought, you've brought it down to the 3D because you've written it down. But in order for that thought to create momentum, we have to take action steps toward that goal that we want to create, that manifestation. And I do believe that there are certain opportunities that already exist in the field, and there are certain energy, they're operating, they're vibrating at a certain frequency. And we sort of maybe have to lift ourselves up to that frequency and meet that opportunity there. I'll give you an example. When we manifested that interview with Dr. Joe Dispenza, he was a person that I'd wanted to interview since the beginning, since I started the podcast. And I had written it down. I had a list of top 10 people. He was way up there on that list. And when I started the podcast, I didn't feel that I was worthy to have that interview. I didn't feel that, I still needed a lot to go. And to the extent that's also true, when I sort of started letting go that, I have to, be doing interviews for 10 years before I can reach out to these people. I mean, why would they want to talk to me? So I started cultivating new thoughts, new beliefs about myself, new beliefs about my mission and what I was to do in this world, that I sort of aligned myself to that opportunity, because I had to say, okay, I feel that I'm ready now for this interview. I've done the work. I don't have anything to prove. And let me just play with it. Let me just, I sat down, I wrote an email. I was playful. I was myself. I wrote the email in my own words. And I just, put it out there into the universe that this is what I wanted. And after I had already taken the action, because sending an email, it's a direct, action step to creating something. even this series that I was telling you about, it all started with an email. It all started with me
Mm.
reaching out and saying, hey, this is what I want. And there's a saying in Spanish that is, el que no llora no mama. And that means the one that doesn't cry, the baby that doesn't cry, doesn't get breastfed. you know? So
Yeah.
essentially, if we don't call out to the universe what it is that we want, then how is the universe going to know what to serve us? How is it going to know what people to put in our way, what opportunities, what doors to open? Because if we are creators, we're also co-creating with that divine essence that you talked about, that that higher self aspect that sometimes opens doors in the moment where we're ready for them. It shows us the teacher when we're ready. It gives us the opportunity. But there was there's there's a very cool story that Billy Carson was telling me that I love to repeat it because it really makes sense in the whole sphere of manifestation, which is there was a man one time and he, sailed out in his boat and he's out in the ocean. He's alone. He's by himself. And all of a sudden some holes start popping into the boat and he starts sinking. And he calls out, God, if you're real, if you're there, please help me. Give me a lifeline, save me. And he just waits there. He makes out his commandment to God and he tells God that he wants him to be rescued. And the day goes by and one boat passes and the guy is throwing a lifeline, but since he's looking up at God and waiting to be saved, he didn't see the boat that was throwing out a lifeline. And then that boat goes away, and then a couple minutes later another boat, the same thing, throws out, hey, let me save you, you're sinking. But he's there like in deep meditation, he's calling out to God, save me, save me, save me. um and eventually the whole day goes on and he eventually sinks. He passes to the other side and he meets God and he says, I told you to save me, what happened, why weren't you there for me? And God says, I sent 4 boats in one day to save you, but you didn't see them because you were too focused on an outcome. So
Yeah.
that's a powerful statement right
That's
there.
very, very powerful.
Hmm.
I think we can all take that into our own lives and our own getting sort of living life a bit like this sometimes, where we need to open the blinders a little bit. Thank you so much for sharing that story.
Of course.
And that moves me on to my final I've got a few little questions that I close off each interview with. And the first one would be, for anyone listening, I'm just going to read it out because I've got it written here. What is the key to living in your truth and authenticity?
I think judgment is a huge piece right there, because we can't be authentic if we judge people around us and if we judge ourselves. And, it's easier said than done to let go of our judgments. But the more we can sort of look around and look at everyone around us, and let's say let's say I want to start a podcast and I see someone in my circle, my community starts a podcast, instead of judging them for it, instead of saying, why did this person do it and I can't do it, sort of feeling that lack, that separation, celebrating that person and saying, if they can do it, I can do it as well. And if you thrive, I thrive. That's a new paradigm in humanity. And that leads to authentic connections, because I've had conversations where I can feel the intent, I can feel the agenda behind the other person when they're speaking, and I know it's not coming from a very safe or authentic place. So when we can sort of let go of those judgments that we have on other people and ourselves, we start communicating from the heart. And the heart is the seat of authenticity. The inner child is the seat of authenticity. The inner child probably sits in our heart. That's where it is. So I would say, very briefly, that those are the ways that I've cultivated more authentic connections when I realize that if we all bring each other up, we all ascend. We all go to the higher room. Um, we all go to the next octave of consciousness that we're all sort of headed to. And authenticity is, for me, about just bringing in the heart space into everything that we do and everything that we say and everything that we create, because people feel that. People feel when it's coming from
Mm.
that place. People can feel when it's not coming from a very pure source. That's why we're drawn to certain teachers. That's why we're drawn to certain podcasts. Why we're drawn to certain people in our lives is because we can feel the energy that they put out. And if we're resonating on an authentic level, then everyone that we attract, you know, minus a few that maybe are big lessons and teachers that our soul contract made, that inevitably will teach us the opposite of love. um, that's when we create those beautiful connections and those beautiful projects and creations around us.
So well said. And you definitely, I think the more that you step into your authenticity, you become more sensitive to the people around you, and you can get an idea for someone's intentions, and whether it's an authentic intention, a pure intention, or there's an ulterior motive.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's sort of sussing out your by you staying authentic, you can surround yourself and sort of navigate along with intuition who else is authentic and who's actually got something else. What's the ulterior motive with someone? And is that serving my greater good? And you can filter people out in a graceful and loving way,
Mm.
but in a sort of way of actually, I've got to serve me and take care of me. And the more that we choose our truth and authenticity, we choose ourselves, we choose the inner child of us feels chosen.
Mm.
And yeah, that was really, really lovely, really well put. Thank you.
Thank you for reflecting.
And that, thank you. And then the second question was, if you had any piece of advice for someone who is sort of starting out on their curious journey to raising their consciousness, um, any advice on how to embark on starting a healing journey or starting an awakening journey?
Hmm. I think the first thing that came to me was just fucking start. Don't wait. Don't wait, because the time is now, and I think there's moments where we have an idea of change, and we want to step into, as Dr. Joe Dispenza says, the river of change, and changing our identity completely. That's a tough thing, because there's going to be an essence of us always, in all these changes that we go through. But life is ever changing, but we have to be willing to face the discomfort that goes along the change. And you will lose a lot of people, but you'll also gain a lot of people. And that's the beauty of change, is that we don't ever really lose anything. It just gets created in a different form. It gets presented to us in an energy that most resonates with ourselves at that moment. If we are truly magnets, and you can verify this through science, there's a north pole and a south pole, and it's creating an electromagnetic torus field around us. And the more connected we are through our heart, the wider it expands. So doing things with the heart, I think that's one of my biggest lessons. Doing things in the face of discomfort. I recommend getting into situations where you're going to face discomfort head on. Things like getting in the ice bath, taking a cold shower, having a difficult conversation with someone that you love. These are all things that sort of push our boundaries to what we think we're capable of. And fear sort of dissolves when we expose ourselves to the potential that we have within us. I thought I wasn't going to be able to do 8 interviews in 2 days shooting in this series. And I was a bit afraid. I was in discomfort the whole time. But now it's like, if I was able to do that, what else can I do? Where else can I push myself? And that goes also for people that run triathlons, marathons, using the physical body, using the voice. Where can you take that pitch? Where can you take your legs? Can you go a little bit farther? Can you go a little bit faster? It's always experimenting with this vessel, because it's a divinely created perfection, mechanism that plugs us into this reality that was created by an intelligence that we can't even comprehend yet, um, utilizing that. And this life isn't about enlightenment, it's about embodiment, because there's already an aspect of ourselves that is enlightened. There's an aspect of ourselves that
Yeah.
has more information, that has more awareness, that has more consciousness. And that's where we're sort of headed to on this journey back, back to oneness. But in this life, it's about how much fun can we have in this vehicle. What can I do with this body? How can I experiment with it? How can I create? um, those are some sort of starting points that I'd probably leave for people.
And what does higher love mean to you?
So I read this one when you sent it to me, and I was thinking about it, and the first thing that came to mind was, there's the love that we have in our day-to-day life with our relationships, and a lot of the times that love may be conditional, that love may be possessive, that that love may be like, let me have this person to myself, or have these things to myself, and not share it with anyone else. And there's the upper room of love, the higher aspect of love, which is, um, the more we expand consciousness, we realize that everything around us is just another manifestation of the divine. And you can use different words for that. You can say another presentation of God, another presentation of the essence, of the force, of higher love. That is, seeing the world through that lens. And Paul Selig, this is where the teachings are coming from the guides. They say that humanity is entering the upper room. Humanity is ascending itself in consciousness, where that separation that we've been talking about, sprinkled through the whole interview, becomes sort of lessened, and we stop seeing the world through those eyes. Higher love steps in when we realize that everything outside of us is just another manifestation of that divine and of ourselves. As within, so without. That's a hermetic esoteric principle that's coming straight from Hermes Trismegistus. It's in other cultures, he's been called Thoth the Atlantean, Kukulkan in Mexico. This was the scribe that would bring together all these ancient divine wisdom, and bestow that upon humanity. And that's one of the teachings: is everything that is within you is without you. Everything that is above you is below. Everything that's inside is a reflection of the outside. So the more we cultivate that love from within, the higher love from within, we create a landscape around us that is filled with that as well. So it's all a reflection of us.
Everything is mirroring us and our universe and ourself.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your time and your incredible wisdom. This has been amazing. And where can people go if they want to find out more about your work? And I will link your podcast below as well when I post this. But yeah, where can people go to find more about you?
Yeah, I would send people to the podcast for sure, because there are some beautiful conversations happening there, and many more to come. It's literally one of my callings in this lifetime, is to facilitate those conversations and hold space for the way showers of the new consciousness. So anyone that really wants to seek out a path, and start seeking new information, seeking new perspectives, that's sort of where I'm curating, the best that I found, into one place. So that the podcast is called Just Tap In. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. It's just my name, Emilio Ortiz. And yeah, to tell people to stay tuned for the series that's coming out, because we made it as sort of a how-to guide to unlock your psychic abilities. So anyone that maybe is a little bit more, advance in the spiritual path, or that, they've cultivated certain gifts that they're afraid to talk about with other people. Like, how come I can sort of perceive this person's energy and I can see colors around them? What's going on?
Yeah.
Or
And how do I tell my mum and my dad that I do this?
Exactly.
Yeah. How do I tell my friends over coffee, I can see your aura?
So this series, it was created with the intention to be sort of like a permission slip for the new psychics that are, awakening to their gifts right now. And we gathered 8 different people from 8 different, psychic abilities that they're experts or practitioners in. And they sort of give us a manual of how to unlock it for ourselves. So that's going to be called Awaken the Sixth Sense. And it was one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had. And yeah, I encourage people to sort of stay tuned for. I don't know when that's going to release, to be honest, but it's out of my hands now. But I know it's going to be coming out soon.
Well, when that comes out, I will obviously be I'll have my eyes on it with social media, so I will link it everywhere. Because I'm definitely going to check that out. Congratulations. I mean, it sounds amazing. And also, I was reading within the book I'm reading, which is Sensitive is the New Strong. They talk about how we are very much sort of awakening to the understanding we live in a sixth sensory world. It's not fifth. There's no such thing as the fifth senses. It's really, we've got six. I can't say it. Six senses.
Yeah.
And just sort of hoping that people sort of realize that, you've got another sense that you can tap into and use.
Yeah. There's some people that say we have up to 12.
12.
And they're just beginning to discover.
I'm not quite there yet.
I think we are, but we just don't have the word. Like, how would you know what smell is if we didn't have a notion or a meaning to smell, or of color? Yeah. How would we know what color is if we didn't have a meaning or a definition or like an intellectual explanation of what color was?
And that takes you down the rabbit hole of like the idea of the simulation as well, that if we're just reflecting ourselves out into the world and everything is just a projection of the self.
Yes. How,
again, simulation theory, but that's a whole nother conversation and topic. So I will close it off here with everything that we discussed. Again, thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.